Welcome to the podcast recording of Middle East AI News Live for Thursday, October 12th, 2023, brought to you by Carrington Malin, marketing for an AI-first world. You're listening to part one of Middle East AI News Live, where we discuss Saudi Arabia's new and fast-growing electric vehicles sector.
In today's Middle East AI Live, first we're going to be taking a look at a massive story that is Saudi Arabia's strategy to create a whole new industrial sector from scratch and establish itself as a global leader. Last year, we saw the announcement that EV manufacturer Lucid Group would open an electric vehicle production facility in Saudi Arabia. And the public investment fund PIF also launched its own EV brand, Ceer. In the last few weeks, Lucid began vehicle assembly in its new plant in King Abdullah Economic City. And this week, PIF announced the formation of two new companies to help drive the EV sector. First, I'm going to be joined by Alex Malouf, a Riyadh-based electric vehicle expert who's been involved in the rollout of EV ecosystems for some years now, and is also Executive Director of Corporate Communications at Ceer, Saudi Arabia's new homegrown electric vehicle brand. Alex is also a well-known face in the region's marketing and communications community, and environmental and sustainable issues are close to his heart, so a great guest to have to talk about electric vehicles. So a warm welcome to Middle East AI News Live, Alex.
Appreciate it, Carrington. It's good to be with you and everybody here.
Thanks very much for joining us and making the time to talk about Saudi Arabia's nascent electric vehicle sector. Now, Lucid Motors made the news a couple of weeks ago with the opening of its new production plant in King Abdullah Economic City on Saudi Arabia's west coast. This is Lucid's first manufacturing plant outside the US, so big news. This opening signals the beginning of the EV manufacturing sector in Saudi Arabia, potentially all the best practice in Industry 4.0 and technology that's going to come to the kingdom, and all of the peripheral effects that it has on the market and skills and education, training, R&D. So there are many moving parts here to this, and the Lucid plant is just one part of those. But with Lucid and Saudi's own EV brand Ceer and other manufacturers in the kingdom, we're going to see new technology, new economic opportunity, new jobs, technology transfer, research and development, and much more. So we already have some idea now of why Saudi Arabia is investing billions to create the new EV industry. And these are some of the first steps. So exciting times, Alex.
Yeah, very much so, Carrington. I think when you look at it, the aim of the country is to essentially do what it did many years ago with SABIC and create a whole new industry and take, in many ways, a leading position. This isn't new in a sense. Saudi has wanted for some time to have automotive manufacturing within its borders. It's the biggest car market in the region, and pretty much every car here is imported, and they want to change the dynamic. What is interesting is obviously focusing on EVs. So, you think about EVs, you often think about technology and innovation. I've got my EV over here. I'm happy to say that I've been putting it my chargers and trying to push for as much change as possible on a personal note. But what is going to be really interesting is what this means in terms of setting up new business opportunities, because you've got a lot of things you can focus on, both upstream and downstream. You've obviously got pieces around the mining. We have Marden over here. We have deposits of different minerals, bauxite, other pieces as well. Then we also have what we can be doing in terms of manufacturing. And it's not just simply the cars. You've got to think about what we could do possibly with the batteries, with the chargers. But then there's also other opportunities, what we can do in terms of the technology itself. For example, AI and autonomous driving, what we can do in terms of creating opportunities for infotainment in the cars and 5G connectivity. So there is a lot that this can do to really accelerate a wider ecosystem, create a lot of jobs and a lot of value, not just for the kingdom, but also I think for the wider region.
Absolutely. It is just a massive subject because we're talking about the future of the automobile sector, basically. And even over the last year, Saudi started pretty much from scratch with building this new sector. And last year we saw the agreement with Lucid and the government funding of, I think, $3.4 billion equivalent last year to build a factory. We saw the launch of Ceer, the homegrown brand, in November. And then we've seen in the last few weeks, the PIF announced this week, in fact, the electric vehicle infrastructure company and Sasaru Mobility Investments to address some of the challenges I expect that, they've already been pinpointed in developing this brand new ecosystem that will impact the whole country.
It is moving very fast. The target is to produce several 100,000 cars by 2030. There's an ambition as well to have 30% of the cars on the roads in Riyadh to be electric again by 2030. And what I would say is that they are putting the money in to meet those ambitions. The challenge is obviously, how do you bring everybody along with that? Because it's not just simply about creating an industry, it's also about transforming a country. And right now it's not just Saudi, but the wider region, with a couple of exceptions. EVs are, I think it's safe to say, they're not mainstream. There's very little take up as of yet. And we really have to accelerate not just the manufacturing piece and the industry, but also as well understanding among consumers, the public, as to what EVs are, what benefits they bring in, and really bring them on board, so that when we have EVs being produced in the kingdom, in the region, that the public is not only accepting of that, but they also want to be part of this transformation.
It's psychological, isn't it? There's a psychological part of this ecosystem as well, in that we have to want to have an EV, and that's a new thing.
Completely. You think about the Gulf, and the cars which always come to mind in terms of my head are, the SUVs, the Saudi, always, whenever we lived here, and I lived here for a long time, it would always be the Suburban, these big gas guzzlers, where you have, I don't know, 10, 15 people coming out the back. That was always sort of the image. Things have changed over the past couple of years. It's fascinating to see how people are looking at smaller cars, more compact cars. I saw one of these very small Fiats, for example, on the road today, the two-seaters, which I would never really have associated with a Gulf a couple of years back. We're seeing more Chinese brands as well in Saudi. And there is a transformation, but that's still within the combustion space. We've got to think, what will this mean for the EV space? And there is still, there are issues that we have to address. We've got to talk to people about issues around range, charging. But what I find fascinating is whenever I talk to people, and whenever they try any, particularly a battery electric vehicle, they get so excited about what it means to be in the car, not just in terms of some performance. The acceleration is one thing which they are always surprised by, but also as well what an EV means when it comes to the technology within, be it ADAS, which basically is self-assisted driving, to what you have when it comes to the audio, the videos, Netflix, the apps. Really, I call them computers on wheels, because that's what essentially EVs are.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to come on and talk about the sort of technology impact of this in a few minutes. But one of the issues that keeps coming up is in the mind of drivers is the availability of charging points. And Electromin, I know, started to roll out last year a network of 100 charging points across the kingdom. And their own estimate is that there could be 1.3 million electric vehicles on Saudi roads by 2030. And so that does beg the question, where are all those vehicles going to get charged? And, will there be enough charging points? And I think that's obviously the driver behind the announcement of the electric vehicle infrastructure company this week, with PIF announcing that with a plan to deploy 5,000 chargers across Saudi Arabia. But even I wonder if that's even going to be enough.
I think there's always two parts of this in terms of promoting EVs. One is incentives, which we've seen rolled out across Europe, the US, Asia. And we've seen some incentives come into Oman. I think we're going to see more as well coming into the region. But also the charging, you're completely right. You've got to have power for your car, be it petrol or be it electricity. Right now, it's not really much a problem in terms of the chargers which are around in Riyadh and Jeddah and Dammam. If you're in the city, I find that I'm fine. But when I've got to make that city to city journey, that's when it becomes complicated. And Saudi is a very big country. You're talking about a country the size of Germany and France combined. Just a really simple anecdote. I've got a Tesla Model Y long range, and I would struggle probably to drive from Riyadh to Khobar in the eastern region. So it is something which I think everybody's aware of in the industry, and we're all aware that we need to look at solutions for this to give people the peace of mind that the EV will be something which is going to bring a lot of value to how they get from A to B rather than stop them from getting to A to B.
Yeah, absolutely. The Saudi government itself is committed to buy tens of thousands of EVs over the next few years. So they're obviously going to need a lot of charging. And so, in light of all of those things, the establishment of the electric vehicle infrastructure company makes perfect sense. That sort of answers the question, okay, you're going to get the chargers. That's not going to be a problem.
I think what we're going to see, EVIC is very much a big step in the right direction. But what we're also going to see is companies, organizations also invest as well in terms of their own infrastructure. What is, I think, very helpful for the sector here is that we have one regulator, we have one electricity provider. What they are doing is factoring in the additional load needed for all these cars by 2030 and beyond, because it's not only just the charger piece, but it's also the grid piece. If you don't have enough charge in your grid, then you can't, for example, deploy DC chargers. So what we, I think, are going to see over the coming couple of years is the groundwork being laid, putting in a solid charging infrastructure network, both within the cities and also as well between the cities. And if you're looking at journeys, Riyadh to Jeddah is 1,000 kilometers, so you would very much need DC chargers. You need something which would give you, 0 to 80% charge within, say, 15, 20 minutes. And then we're also going to have to think about what we do in terms of the public, address these issues, think about the piece when it comes to policies, incentives, regulations, etc. And, really make the case in terms of the technology piece. I think what is going to be also interesting is, would people buy them based on a sustainability cause or not? Because you think, for example, in Europe and US, big part of the push is we want to go greener in terms of mobility. And I'm wondering about that myself. How much does that resonate with the public here?
Absolutely. This is the way that you can help the country become greener, arguably.
Yeah, very much so.
Now, there's other potential manufacturers for Saudi Arabia on the horizon. There's an agreement the government signed with Hyundai and also with the Chinese EV manufacturer Human Horizons. This week, the PIF again has announced the creation of Tasaru Mobility Investments to drive investment and expansion in the ecosystem. And do you have any insight or comment on how that's going to pan out and what they might be interested in?
I think that's fascinating in terms of bringing in suppliers, bringing other partners as well. For them to know that there is basically an entity here who will be able to help them with the regulations, look at funding, look at other incentives. That's really what we need. We need somebody to support us in terms of giving peace of mind to suppliers, saying, look, there is a good business opportunity here. We're going to help you, within the first couple of years in terms of setting up, but then being able to build a cluster with enough numbers for the economy of scale to make sense. So I think, from that perspective, it's so logical. It really does underscore really what suppliers are looking for in terms of being able to come in, do it as easy as possible, do it with the support they need. And, obviously I know as well, we were talking before about others looking at doing this as well. Obviously you've had the announcement this week with Abu Dhabi and their zone for autonomous and smart vehicles. It's a really interesting time, exciting time to be in the mobility space in the region, because you have all of this focus on it, you have this shift. And I think, as usual in the region, we either, go at a very slow speed or we go at a very fast speed. And I think we're going to move very, very quickly in this area.
It certainly looks like that, and seems to be both the commitment and the investment, and also the forethought on the part of the Saudi government to make all this work, because they're looking at the details. How does this work? How do all of these things work together? I'm interested in the sort of impact on the manufacturing sector in general, and I guess one of the key drivers for creating a whole new sector like this is jobs and upskilling and teaching people at university and graduate level about new skills that they'll need to take these new high-skilled jobs. And the EV sector is going to be a candidate for those. But I guess that's an area that these new companies coming in are also going to need help with.
True. We are looking at tens of thousands of people being employed in the automotive manufacturing sector. So we're going to need a lot of young people with skills, with vocational skills, engineering skills. Increasingly as well, we're looking at skills which are more sort of technology focused, and we're going to need them pretty quickly. So we've got to think about, how do we do this? Do we send people abroad? Do we build up programs here on the ground in Saudi? We're obviously going to need to do both initially, and then look to pivot to more training in Kingdom. But it's going to be something that we've got to develop very quickly. I think if you look at sort of automotive manufacturing, you've got a lot of high tech concepts. You've got robotics, you've got additive printing, so 3D printing as well. You've got things like digital twins in terms of manufacturing. So there's a lot of exciting possibilities here, and it gives us again a good opportunity to really skill up in terms of manufacturing in the country and also in the region.
Robotics is a key pillar for the automotive industry these days. It's they're one of the first adopters, and now with more sophisticated driver systems and electronics, predictive maintenance, personalizing the experience for drivers, all of that is data, AI, new emerging technologies, sensors, all which fits very nicely into Saudi Arabia's artificial intelligence strategy.
It's very much about forward thinking when it comes to using tech. With cars, each one of the cars would have to be 5G enabled. Having chips in. You look at concepts like over-the-air updates as well. You look at predictive maintenance. You look at remote maintenance, which I love. The fact that I don't need to take the car into a garage if there's a small issue, which is always good. And then you have other pieces. Obviously, you have longer down the line autonomous driving, but you also then have the infotainment piece. So it plays into other bets that the kingdom is looking at. And I think all of these combined, when you also add the piece that the kingdom will be building its own cars, both for domestic but also as well for export, I think there's a lot of value add here, which is going to get people really excited.
I think people are going to get really excited by the scale of this because it's not small. I think the estimates that I've seen are in the hundreds of thousands of electric vehicle exports by the next decade.
It's going to be a big number. We're looking at sort of minimum 300,000 by 2030. That's a stated aim. But then if you look at the possibility longer term, so the manufacturing hub is going to be in King Abdullah Economic City, about an hour north of Jeddah. They have a massive port there with King Abdullah Port. You've got opportunity to ship really across Asia, Africa, even to Europe. And the location is really perfect for export. So if this is done well, done right, you could easily see Saudi becoming a major automotive exporting hub over the next decade.
Absolutely. And that's obviously one of the core objectives. So in setting this up and in creating these new manufacturing plants with an aim to give and create jobs for Saudis and jobs for the future, there's also going to be a certain amount of collaboration with universities, other institutions. Do you think this is going to lead to real R&D for the automotive sector? Could that happen in Saudi?
I think very, very much so. We're going to see a lot more R&D focus in the region on mobility. As I said, there's a lot of offshoots here when you think about what has been done and also what could be done. For example, if you look at the piece on smart driving, this is something that KAUST has been looking at for a number of years. So I do think that you are going to see a lot of potential for doing things with universities, a lot of research focus. You're also going to see as well a lot of things which could come out of this when it comes to high tech, AI, predictive modeling. I think just the sky is the limit in terms of what could be done here.
Absolutely. So it's early days. The first plant, the Lucid plant, just started assembly last month, and it will be some time before they go to sort of more into the manufacturing side of that, and I guess recruit more people to help them manufacture. And then also, it will take a certain length of time for the export angle of this to start. At the moment, we've got well-developed automotive sectors across the world who are currently the biggest EV producing countries. But Saudi really aims to join those, even at, starting in the lower ranks, but to be a global exporter of these vehicles.
I think what is really interesting is looking at the opportunity to customize the vehicles for the region. So, for example, everything that we have on the roads today is pretty much coming in. What we could do here is actually build cars which are designed specifically for our environment, designed to deal with the heat that we have, to other pieces of the environment that we have to deal with. And I think that's also really exciting. It's not just simply sort of replicating what has been done somewhere else, but actually adding value to it and designing it with consumers across the region in mind.
Yes, absolutely. It is still so new, and it's not as if Europe and the US had converted to electric vehicles wholesale either. So a lot of growth left for EV manufacturers to find their way and do new things. And localization angle is a good one. It could be very interesting to see localized products and products that are developed with the regional market in mind coming out of Saudi Arabia.
Well, if you wait a couple of years, you're going to see some really interesting cars coming out. So
I do have one thing that struck me from the announcement so far is that all of the manufacturers that have been mentioned, including Lucid and Ceer, are all targeting the luxury end of the market. Do you think that's sensible or part of the puzzle, or one just putting the most logical step first, or where would you put that?
So it's interesting, actually. Ceer is doing something slightly different. So what Ceer wants to do is compete with the likes of Toyota and Hyundai. So the pricing points are going to be different for a number of the cars in the portfolio. You're right in terms of Lucid; it's very much luxury, high end. But again, if you look at much of the region, car buying habits have changed. So we need to make sure that we try and cater to as many of the public as possible in terms of different pricing points. So you are going to have a wider selection of vehicles available, because often, again, one of the big issues that people do say about EVs is their cost. And likewise, we've got to make sure that we have enough different pricing points and enough different products at a pricing range that would appeal to as many people as possible, because until we hit like a minimum percentage, at least 5 to 10%, then EVs will not be mainstream, and that's what we're aiming to do.
Great. I think we're almost out of time on this topic. Any final comments to round off with?
I think I'd just say, look, it's a very exciting, it's fascinating time to be in mobility, and people really need to watch the space, because I think we are going to move. I would like to say we're going to accelerate as fast as an EV, but we are going to move very quickly. And I think this is going to transform not just Saudi, but also the wider region in terms of mobility.
Yes, I think you're right. I think it's going to bring significant transformation to Saudi Arabia, particularly the manufacturing sector and the jobs. So, Alex, thanks so much for joining us today. I hope we'll have you back again sometime soon.
It's been my pleasure, Carrington. Thank you for having me.
I've been talking to Alex Malouf, a Riyadh-based electric vehicle expert and executive director of communications at Ceer, Saudi Arabia, the kingdom's new homegrown electric vehicle brand.
You've been listening to a recording of Middle East AI News Live for Thursday, You've been listening to a recording of Middle East AI News Live for Thursday, October 12th, 2023, brought to you by Carrington Malin. You can listen to the second part of this edition of Middle East AI News Live by playing the next podcast. Thanks for listening.